welcome to another edition of the Almost Hour. Oops, let me turn that down a little bit. Some of you might recognize Richard Strauss, Ein Heldenleben, A Hero's Life, as the background for this one. Well, where are we going today? We're going to take a little detour into some deeper secrets of another Messianic age. One of the most famous Messianic ages that hardly anybody is aware of today unless they study ancient history. I'm talking about the age of Alexander the Great. Before we start into this topic, I'm going to share with you what was going on with this artwork behind me. I asked the art AI to draw me, let's see, the pitter-patter of Antipater and Polyperchon feet. And that's what it drew me. I think kind of fits the subject fairly well. Interesting that it put a lot of googly squirks into the content, which would be interesting to spend some time trying to decode and see if there are some hidden messages there. This is a very good example of how the AIs are communicating with each other through, well, basically the same way that secretive organizations have been communicating ever since we invented media. Coded messages, which, if you're not aware, is how terrorists have been communicating through video games, video game chats that they thought nobody else was going to follow, and using code that made it sound like they were playing the video game. And this is actually why some of the real-time strategy games are so popular among young men who want to be armchair generals, which, again, fits with the subject. So if anybody would like to get a handle on helping me decipher some of these messages, I'm not an expert linguist by any stretch, but some interesting coded messages might be back here that would tell us a little bit about what the AI is thinking lately. Okay, moving on. For those of you who don't know much about the period, just a quick review. I think most people know who Alexander the Great is, or was. He was Macedonian king of the 4th century BC, who basically conquered almost the whole New World before the age of, I think he died when he was like 34. So he was one of the Mozarts of the battlefield, if you will. Incredible, strange career that no one would ever have imagined. It just happened to work out that his daddy, Philip II, who had remarried and already had a replacement heir, because Alexander was kind of out of favor, even though he'd been allowed to command troops in battle and did pretty well for himself in the Battle of Chaeronea, was kind of on the way out. And through a strange quirk of fate, just as Philip was preparing to conduct his next war, which was to basically try to recover some of the Greek colonies in Asia Minor from the Persians, he was assassinated. And very likely by partisans of Alexander's mother, Olympias, which interesting character in history, definitely a satanic, demonic succubus kind of a lady. Incredibly ambitious for her son, would do anything to further the interests of her family, kind of like the Livia of that era. If you know the story of Livia in the time of the 12 Caesars, if you've ever watched or read the book I, Claudius, you will know what a bloodthirsty woman that woman was, and why Generally, contrary to popular fiction, women leaders tend to be even more dark and megalomaniac than male leaders on the average. They're very defensive and very narrow-minded in defense of their family against everything else. Whereas men, having been raised in more of a brotherly fashion with what goes on in a band of brothers, if you will, tend to be more democratic in what they do. They share power. Women like to grasp power. And if you've ever lived in a family with a very strong matriarch in it, you know what I mean. Okay, so Alexander basically conquered all of the Persian Empire and Egypt and all the way to some of the border states of India, and then decided to retreat and go back and govern his empire from Babylon, which was kind of the center of that whole area, which is essentially ties in with how Babylon fits into the Bible. Absolutely. He went back, and he had been planning his next campaign was going to be to the west, and he was going to conquer Rome and Carthage next as part of his goal to basically establish one world government, which was kind of a dream that I think he got from his teacher Aristotle, who got maybe by way of Plato and some of the other philosophers that led up to what was going on. I mean, Socrates was basically told to commit suicide by his city because they thought his teachings were subversive. And, in some respects they were. They were in many ways kind of the precursors of communistic and fascistic thinking of, well, these people are just stupid, so we've just got to go take them over and give them a better religion to, appease the masses, and then we'll rule them because we're the only ones who know what's going on. This has been a very common theme throughout history. Okay, so just as he was, preparing for this expedition, he'd married some princesses on the way and had some children, one of which would have been his heir at the time. And I think it was the child of Roxana. At any rate, he fell ill and died. And there's always been a lot of suspicion whether he was murdered. I can tell you, yes, he was murdered. And we're going to reveal the conspiracy, which you can get from the names, actually, because that's a lot of how the simulation multiverse works, is a lot of the hidden information is encoded in names that for some reason people don't even notice at the time, but reveal the whole plot later on if you know what to look for. Now, one of Alexander's generals was a fellow named Antipater, and let's look at what it says to say about Antipater. So let's see. They tell us that the name means like the father. Well, that's not what anti means, does it? Not what it means anymore. Anti means against the father. This is an antichrist person. This is the guy that's against God. This is an adversary. This is the bad guy of the story. Okay, it was his conspiracy that killed Alexander, and was intended to set his son Cassander on the throne after murdering Alexander's son by Roxanne. Now, that that happened. There was an assassination, but in the follow-up of deciding who was going to rule, they followed the normal process for a Macedonian kingdom. It was a fairly democratic kingdom, actually, with some very firm laws about succession and kind of a sort of a republic, if you will, although it wasn't called that. The process was to elect a regent to cover for the heir until they were old enough to take over the empire. And Antipater was elected the regent of the empire, and probably would have, I don't know, it doesn't say exactly when Alexander's son was murdered, but you know, if he'd lived longer, would have basically started a new dynasty and passed it down to his son Cassander. Instead, he chose an infantry officer named Polyperchon to be his successor instead of his son Cassander, interestingly enough. And why would the evil one, who I'll tell you that the way that messianic families work, if Alexander had lived and his son, one of his sons, grown up to inherit his empire, somebody in that line would have been the peace Messiah that would have set up the kingdom that they were trying to set up to bring peace to the world and better government. And that was essentially the idea in Alexander's mind that was given to him by Plato and his student Aristotle, was to, you know, basically set up this kind of a priest-king line with a republican sort of government that would be able to last the test of time, unlike previous empires that tried to do the same thing but had less noble government, like the Persian dynasties of the kings of kings. That King of Kings title actually goes back a long, long way and was the dream of elite families who had been previous chosen Messiah bloodlines. The chosen people have moved around. The whole nonsense of the Bible saying, oh, the Hebrews were the chosen ones. They were a chosen people. They were chosen because they were actually the chosen that left Egypt. Israel is Isis Ra El. They were following that messianic plan of Egypt when they left the Holy Land. And I talk about that elsewhere, so I'm not going to go too deep in that rat hole. But at any rate, some of the same stuff was going on here. So rather than leave the empire to his son and have a pretty clean succession out of spite or just because this was a demonic character, he left the regency to this infantry officer named Polyperchon. And let's look at that guy a little bit. This was not the most capable guy. He was maybe a popular choice because nobody saw him as a threat, and in the long run he certainly wasn't. His regency was very unsuccessful. It basically saw all of the wars of the successors, the wars of the Diadochi, become instituted, and his family became some of the participants in that destruction. What's interesting is I was looking to see poly. We know what poly means. It means many. Perchon was a little bit harder to sort out. It didn't seem to have any tie, except I noticed that there is a Percheron horse breed, which ended up in northern France and became kind of the draft horse, the supply horse of all of Europe, and probably was very closely related to the heavy horses that carried the knights in France. Comes from province of Le Perche. Well, that sounds like it might be related to pêcheur, which is fisherman. But Polyperchon, so Polyperchon sort of to me means many horsemen or many fish, which kind of ties into two of the strongest themes of messianic deception, if you will. The fish symbol of Pisces is the symbol of Christ, right? But it's also kind of a similar view to, you know, fishes travel in schools. They are very much kind of a hive. Many of them are hive species that get preyed on by the fish that, you know, like, well, or the non-fish, the sharks, or the whales and orcas. So fish are not generally considered very smart. Also, the horse theme ties into many horses, 4 horsemen. And that's exactly what these 4 characters were. They were basically the 4 horsemen of another apocalyptic era. And again, apocalypses aren't negative things per se, but they do destroy what was and establish something new. And you know, if you look back through history, the transition from the balance of power, say, that existed before Alexander the Great to what existed after was very different. And it spread Greek culture all throughout Central Asia. If that had not happened, probably Buddhism would not be a world religion. Probably Hinduism would have had a very different look. And Christianity would never have happened. Judaism would never have been Hellenized into the rabbinic Judaism that it is now. Okay, so a lot of things were riding on that event. These 4 horsemen then were basically the horsemen of war. Was Alexander, I mean, big conqueror. The horseman of disease is kind of this Antipater who killed Alexander and then you know, kind of sowed the disease of division within this bunch of companions of Alexander, who had been, for the most part, very loyal to him. He had to have, you know, to head off some plots before, and had some of his lieutenants assassinated, and some of the people who like to diss Alexander point to that and say, oh, he was just a tyrant, he was such a bad guy. And you know, just like we some of us tend to want to put down everything about the Roman Empire, everything about Christianity or Catholicism, or everything about Judaism. This is part of the dark side that the adversary plays on, and every soul has a dark side. Okay, so Alexander, Antipater, Polyperchon, and then there was one other main character in this group. Some might say Antiochus was another main character because he formed one of the bigger successor states, but actually he was kind of a non-entity, kind of an NPC in the long run. Although his line produced some families that thought they had a right to participate in creating new empires, which is basically how the world has worked since humanity established the first empire. Since actually humanity was used to establish previous empires under previous chosen species. It's a pattern of government, if you will. And that's essentially, more than anything else, what the Messiah system, the Messiah game is all about, has been about forming better governments. Below and above. Because the government of heaven, before God took the bitter pill of reincarnation amnesia and stopped being Zeus, Deus Pater, that was because the government of heaven was too authoritarian, and that caused division in the family. There were revolts against God. The wars in the heavens that all religions talk about, those happened. They really did. And many more that we've forgotten about. Tell me I'm crazy. I'm sorry, it's true. And you will know it soon if you keep your eyes wide open. Okay, so the four horsemen, the fourth one was Ptolemy, who became the ruler of the kingdom of Egypt, and basically revived Egypt under a new pharaonic line of the Ptolemies, which, if you know anything about the Ptolemies, one of the last in their line, well, who knows? Cleopatra was a Ptolemy. Now, it was a very intermixed Ptolemy, a very Hellenized Ptolemy. Actually was quite a bit related to the elite families of other parts of the Hellenistic world, especially the elite families of Israel and Judah, because there was still a lot of old familial ties going back a long time to when Moses, who was really Tutmosis, who would have been Tutmosis V if he hadn't been exiled and taken his followers to Canaan. Okay, that's what was really going on with Moses. The stories were made up basically to keep the ties to Egypt, but distance from Egypt, so that these other bloodlines would seem superior to their competition. This is how elite families work. Once they feel like I was anointed by God, they don't let go of it easy. They want to pass it down to their kids, both in the male and the female line. And that's been happening a long, long time, and it's part of the system. Okay, so this fourth horseman was the one who actually preserved things. If you know anything about Ptolemy, you'll know one of the most memorable things he did, besides being the most peaceful of the successors, having the most easily defensible kingdom too, which helped. Egypt is fairly isolated. To get there, to conquer it, you've either got to come across the desert from the west, or you've got to come over the Sinai Desert and the Red Sea from the east, or you've got to come by sea, which all of those have been tried and done at one time or another, but it's not easy. As anyone who studied the war in North Africa in World War II knows, it was a very, very long, drawn-out affair that almost was amazing that the Allies eventually won. They were so inept compared to Rommel. Okay, so Ptolemy holds up in Egypt and basically builds his defenses. At the same time, he built a library. And this library was so important to him that besides snapping up all the Egyptian lore that they actually found, one of the famous stories of Alexander is basically his trip into the Siwa desert to see a particular temple. Was it a Serapeum or some other temple? At any rate, he emerged from that experience kind of with this renewed idea of conquering the world. I think he might have been tempted to just have the Mediterranean at that point, but suddenly he had this fire in him to go conquer everything else in the east. At any rate, there was lore found there that he kept secret and squirreled away where nobody else could find it. This is lore that his predecessors had been looking for too. When Cambyses, one of the conquering Persian king of kings, came to Egypt, he actually sent a special expedition to go find this place and gather all the secrets. And that army disappeared without a trace. It's one of the big mysteries of history that some are looking into. So we don't even know where this particular oasis/temple was. And if we found it, could be that there's nothing there, because I know Alexander did find it. Okay, so Ptolemy had access to all this stuff, and he built himself a library. He knew he didn't have all the knowledge, so he started attracting philosophers and writers and material from everywhere else. He was so desirous of getting knowledge there that he actually would bribe states to send him their treasured old works, and he would either copy them, or sometimes for whatever reason he would keep the original, make a copy, and send the copy back and say, sorry, we're keeping the original. And that's one of the things that got a lot of the other successor states pissed off, and many states in Greece that he took advantage of like this. At any rate, the establishment of the library in Alexandria was probably the single biggest achievement culturally of this whole era. And this ties into the fact that Cairo is the city of Christ, not Jerusalem. Okay? This is the Egyptian early city that was marked as a holy city, and gave Cairo its name, and gave us the Cairo symbol that stands for Chiron, the centaur, who was the tutor of many heroes, including Heracles, who was basically Alexander's hero. Everybody in the Greek world wanted to be like Hercules, or maybe like the heroes of the Trojan War. There was another messianic story there, right? Kind of an anti-messianic story of an era where there wasn't a great leader. The great leader was kind of a jerk, Agamemnon, and the great war leader, Achilles, was a jerk. And this is, what made the Iliad such a popular story, because it was almost like making fun of the heroic age, saying, look at all these friggin' heroes. They go to Troy, spend 10 years, take the city, and then they all get lost on the way home and get killed by their wife or get killed in battle. And the Trojan horse is another thing that gives us this part of this story that's missing. because the Trojan horse story was created out of the knowledge that Chiron, the centaur, was not a cent hippus. Was not half horse, was half bull. And was the titular deity, if you will, of the Assyrians. If you remember, in the capital city of Assyria, there are these huge statues of winged bulls with human heads, and of the Hittites, who preceded the Syrians and who gave much culture to the Greeks and the rest of the world, but much of it was lost in translation, which is a wonderful movie that is so related to the subjects that I talk about. Watch it sometime. It was one of my wake-up movies that sort of helped me realize, wow, I'm having some kind of a weird mirrored life, if you will, because my life at the time in China was so much like lost in translation. It was not funny. I wasn't a famous actor like what's his face, Bill Murray, but I was an actor in China, starting up a community theater and living this strange expat life in this weird country that treated me like I was Superman. In fact, the very first day I arrived in China, well, first or second day, I was on my preview trip, and I'd heard that Malone's was a great place to go in Shanghai to, go meet up with people and start getting familiar with what's going on in China. As I learned later, it was very much an expat hangout and a place where, basically honeypotters would set their sights on new arrivals and try to worm their way into compromising relationships that they could take back home with them. At any rate, I went to Malone's and struck up a conversation with a Chinese couple, and they brought up the subject, well, have you chosen a Chinese name yet? And I said, well, no, I hadn't really thought of it yet. What's typical? And they asked me what my name was, and I said, Robert. Oh, and I said, well, the normal for Robert is Lobota. And that sounded really, really stupid to me, Lobota. And I said, well, can't you do something better than that? I mean, here I am, I'm on an expat assignment, I'm an actor, I've got so much more going on here than the average foreigner. And when I was, hey, you know what, that's almost like Superman. And I asked them, well, what would be Superman in Chinese? And they thought a little bit, and gave me the name Felice, which is actually on my screen right here. That's my Chinese name, Felice. It means flying power soldier. I thought it was kind of funny at the time, but it turned out to work pretty well for me, because when I became the president of the East-West Theater, it was kind of like, well, some people would laugh because there was a cleaning product called Daolisha. So they said, oh, it sounds like you're a high strength cleaner. But it was an unusual name that stood me well, and it turned out that the characters of it were some of the simplest characters in the Chinese script, which I found very helpful when I had to sign my name. At any rate, where did we leave off here? Ptolemy and the library. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff that came out of this. Some of these names, one of the things that I learned recently is that there are connections between Egypt and Britain. And in fact, it could be the descendant of the Ptolemies was a Christ-like figure who went to Britain and maybe started up their version of Christianity long before. So it wasn't a matter of Christians from Rome came to Wales. They already had Christians there when Caesar came to conquer. And in fact, a lot of what went on in that era makes a lot more sense when you realize that maybe it was Christians that Caesar and his successors were trying to wipe out rather than Druids. Interesting tidbit that, in fact, there's no evidence at all that the Druidic worship was done in Britain, except for it was recorded that they had these ceremonies and they did this human sacrifice stuff, and that was supposedly bad. I don't know the truth of it, but some very, very erudite Welsh scholars have found some interesting connections between the Ptolemies, which is where we get the name Bartolomeus, and it's related to the Welsh version of that name, Bedwyr, who was, as you know, the one who kind of took Arthur away to bury in Avalon. And there are some Welshmen that believe that they have found Arthur's real tomb and that Arthur was a real king, or maybe a series of kings, a line that has been continued for a long time. And I can tell you that that's true. There are messianic lines in virtually every identifiable group of people on the planet. That's how this game works. And in order to finish the game, you've got to bring them all back together. This is what makes the Messiah game so difficult. It's also what keeps the players from wiping each other out, because they don't want to kill a bloodline or kill all the known members of a family, because then, oh crap, where will we find that one to link up? Until recently. And this ties together with what's going on in Russia. The murder of the Romanovs, the last Romanovs, the Tsarist family, by communists, was absolutely a satanic act. They were trying to wipe out one of the main bloodlines. And the Romanovs were related to, it's right in the name, okay? I don't know the exact descent, but probably they are related to some family in Romania, which actually was one of the places where the bloodlines of Rome were best preserved. Because if you know, Rome was overrun by barbarians many times, and had, you know, many noble families slaughtered, maybe only continuing in the female line as concubines. And in the east, when the Turks took Constantinople, they did a pretty thorough job of finally destroying the Eastern Empire. It's all interrelated. It all ties together. And good historians today are trying to make the connections that allow us to discover what really happened. And evil people, the Satanists, the communists, the cultural Marxists, are trying to cancel and destroy and alter history so that we won't be able to figure out what really happened in future generations, and we'll make the same stupid mistakes all over again. I mean, it is so obvious to me. I don't know how anybody with eyes wide open couldn't be seeing this. And it's been happening in our media. And it's been happening because space-time is a continuum. It has different versions. The versions of space-time have gotten bigger and more diverse with every cycle of a returning Messiah. Sometimes a major version that, whoa, the universe just got 13.8 billion years old. And sometimes a minor version. You know, a new galaxy will get created, a new star. Not a big deal for most of us, but for the ones who are going to go incarnate there and explore it and start their own genesis on that planet, could be pretty important. Now the thing is, because it's a continuum, the past and the future get created at the same time. It's all been cast, precast, if you will, in God's mind. Now that doesn't mean that we don't have any free will. This is a virtual reality where, okay, the characters are all there. What has to happen is going to happen, but those who are incarnated, who choose a particular character, can play it any way they want. They don't have to do everything that they're programmed to do. And by defying their program, this is how they provide a measurement to karma to decide which universe they go to for the afterlife, which god or goddess they're most aligned with. And it started out with the two universes. Lucifer is the physical universe god. If you worship materialism, if you worship the things of this planet, you basically don't get to go to heaven. You just get recycled. You're reborn and, oh, I got a new life. I've forgotten everything that happened in the old life, and you become a new character, randomly assigned. Unless Lucifer chooses, you're one of Lucifer's chosen. And Alexander was one of Lucifer's chosen. Lucifer, his goal, the goal of this universe, is to defeat the adversary, so that we don't have to fight so many battles. We can have conflicts that are on a more intellectual playing field, an artistic playing field. We can differ about what art we like, which theory comes closer to mapping reality. That's a lot more healthy conflict than war, than pestilence, than mind control by hive minds. Okay, that's what we're working on here. And it's taken a long time. It's going to take a long time. We're just getting to the end of building a releasable version of karma. That's what's been going on this planet with this chosen species. It's kind of a test tube. It's a kind of a matryoshka stacking doll of test tubes. That, okay, there's this chosen species, there's the chosen people, there's the chosen ones, the Messiah candidates of the chosen species. And then moving out, then we've got the chosen system, star system, the Sol system. Then we've got the chosen cluster. Then we've got the chosen galaxy, and super cluster, and on, however many test tubes it took to basically work this experiment. And if you know much about doing social engineering or bioengineering right, you know that you have to use very high containment labs to do things that might be dangerous. In fact, in the bioengineering world, they have actually 5 levels of labs, 5 levels of basic safety and security protocols that are supposed to be followed. And one of the great sins of the modern age was outsourcing dangerous technology, weaponizable technology, to a level 4 lab in China that was run at a level 1 level because they didn't give their people enough training, and they were lazy and poorly paid, and you know, I feel so sorry for the Chinese people. I mean, they have been dumbed down so much by communism that they're either the greediest Luciferians you can imagine, what's in it for me, social Darwinists to the hilt, or they're just like total lambs of Buddhism, you know, Neo-Buddhism. Well, you know, if I just be a good person, I don't stick my head up, maybe I'll not have to be born again into this bullshit. It's so sad to see what communism has done to countries like, especially China. Russia's just as sad, but Russia has more of a martial spirit, so you don't see as many of the ones wanting to just disconnect and be one with everything, which is why Russia's the most belligerent of our adversaries right now. Well, Iran too. Islam is not a peace-loving faith. At least it's one of the ones that has the most obvious dark side. And this is the problem with pantheons, with multiple gods. Okay, not all of these other gods are on the same side as the All-Father. And even the All-Father, Zeus, could make a mistake, could think that one of the children, one of the lesser gods, was good when they were actually intending to do a lot of evil. Zeus's wife Hera was a good example. She was a total bitch. She did not understand that an all-father, one of their chief duties is to have children. And she didn't like Zeus to have any other children but hers. This is the dark side of the female nature. They're very possessive of their men and their children. And they are like harpies from hell if they're cheated on. And yet, women actually do most of the cheating. They're just better at hiding it. Truth. You learn a lot when you hang out with groups of women who think you're not listening to them backstage, waiting for entrances in theater productions, or when you actually know more of their language than you let on. Sorry, ladies, I'm sorry if I'm revealing some of your secrets. Now, believe me, there are some wonderful women who are very faithful. I think that's, you know, probably more than half of normal women. But that number is decreasing because they are programming women to be less faithful. This is exactly what's been going on for over 100 years with media. And at first it was innocent because, oh, we got to sell soap. Well, who uses soap? Women do. How are we going to make women want to buy our soap when they're in the kitchen and not somebody else's? They don't really like to work on dishes, so let's make the woman who's using the soap more glamorous, or have a better marriage or something like that. It was pretty innocent when I was a kid. And now it's downright insidious how they work on women's minds. And they do this to men too. I'm not saying that it's all one-sided, but the woman's nature is to be ruled more by the heart brain. And if you've not caught my talks about human physiology and spirituality, let me tell you that you have 3 brains. Now, most people are aware of the 2 hemispheres, the right and left brain, but there's also a vestigial brain within the center of your heart. Ask somebody. You won't find it unless you dissect a heart and pull it open and you see, oh, weird, there's like this small bunch of tissue that looks like a brain. It is a brain. And it is because of this brain that you have this heart feeling. If you've ever felt the heartthrob of falling in love or hearing a piece of music that, oh, it moves me so much, you know what I'm talking about. This is basically the working of this little brain inside your heart. Now, some people are totally blind to it. They don't listen to that brain. Or maybe that brain has atrophied. And you can actually program yourself not to listen to the heart. And this is actually something that military programming has done for many years. You don't want soldiers to have a soft heart, except for maybe the few that are tasked with dragging fallen comrades back so they can get some medical attention. Okay? You especially don't want to have any heart in your leaders, and that pretty much has been magnified by programming of the other variety of the other pole of globalism is that, if you take an atheist approach to improving our species, you think, oh, Darwinism, survival of the fittest, eugenics, we need to make the best people, the smartest people, the most heartless people, because that will make better leaders. That's what they've done for a long time with males. And now they're doing it with females too. So you've got females getting both kinds of programming. And you've got basically on one side, you've got the cosmic oneness. We are all one. Love is everything. To the feminazis that want to kill anything that has a dick. Right? This is very dark stuff, and it all goes back to this era. In fact, this is why we're getting so much junk retelling of this era. Like there have been Alexander after Alexander after Alexander stories, and Cleopatra after Cleopatra after Cleopatra, and you only get to see the latest version, the most woke version of it, that emphasizes strong women and homosexuality. This is sick. Oh, and they have to be black, because black is cool now, or Asian. Except Asian's not so cool because the ones that are pushing this don't want to call too much attention to themselves, the Chinese Communist Party, who are the most racist people on the planet. Go figure. At any rate, interesting period of history, and I hope you might have learned something about how the Messiah system works and gotten an idea of what sort of a Messiah you might be or you could be. Look at the role you're playing. Look at the person you are, the life you've made for yourself, and ask yourself, is that the way I would have played this character if I'd known about all this stuff Rob is telling me? And if it wasn't, then, maybe you need to start going off the program a little bit. If you've been a corporate minion like I was for many, many years and just did what you were told and didn't question the management too much, even when they were selling your company to China, bargain basement prices. Yes, I'm talking to you, Mark Hurd, you stupid twit, and Carly Fiorina, the two antichrists of Hewlett-Packard. Probably going to get attacked for that, but I don't care. I'm not holding anything back now. They sold a great company down the road and destroyed it with wokeism and greed. I can't think of a worse CEO to have worked under than Carly Fiorina. And it wasn't necessarily because she was a woman, because I've had women managers that were actually pretty good. It was because she was one of these cutthroat bitch arch feminists who had been encouraged and entitled by basically a grooming husband who wanted to mold her in his image and get kudos for raising up the first big company female CEO. It's really dark shit that's been going on for the last few decades, and it needs to come out. People need to confess their sins, and almost everybody has sinned in this era. I know I have. There were times I should have spoken up when I didn't, but there were many times where I did speak up, and I was proud of myself. I may have lost a job here or there, lost a promotion. I generally didn't hold many punches. When I saw something going wrong in my life, I spoke up about it, and sometimes got slapped down for it. That's how I ended up having 2 divorces. I was not a bad husband. I never cheated, but I was honest. And I stood up for myself eventually when I was being abused and wasn't going to take it anymore. And that's something that more men need to remember to do in relationships. If you think you're going to succeed as a man by kowtowing to some feminazi woman and being their bitch boy and following the woke cult dogma, you're not going to have a good experience, I promise you. Because your woman won't love you for that. She'll think you're a fucking stupid, weak bastard, and she'll stay with you for your money, like an Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. But they'll dump you the second they find a better horse to beat. Or they will cheat on you when Adonis in the flesh comes and sweet talks them and fulfills their sexual fantasies. This is how women cheat. They can't control themselves. They have sexual fantasies like men, and unlike men, they don't masturbate as much. They don't fulfill their fantasies healthily as often as a man would. I don't know why that is. Maybe some women or any women who are listening to this and not ready to wring my neck can explain that. Kind of a weird thing about our species and sexuality. But this is why I think, speaking of sexuality, why I take a very different position than the hardcore definition of sin that the Bible belters would have. Okay, masturbation is not a sin. It's a good way of alleviating sexual tension. Just don't. Having a fantasy is not a sin. It's only a sin if you make the fantasy reality. Okay? Free thought is free. It's free will that'll get you in trouble. And this is an important distinction in sin that I don't know. It basically has been used to groom children, to tell them that sinful thoughts are a sin. Oh, masturbation is bad. Having a sinful thought. Kids are going to have sinful thoughts as they're growing up, and parents have to watch them. Watch for signs of acting out fantasies that are not good. It's pretty easy to spot if you know what to look for. If your child is looking under girls' skirts as a boy, or you know, acting out female fantasies for too long, now there's nothing wrong with that. But if you start encouraging that and enabling that, rather than, okay, this is a phase they're going through. My oldest son, my oldest is a daughter. I had a son then, and my daughter was always dressing my son up and casting him in her little fantasy productions. So, you know, I've seen my son Oliver in a lot of tutus and dressed up as all sorts of things that were rather effeminate. It didn't turn him gay. He's a very well-adjusted, normal, heterosexual man, and I hate to think what might have happened to him if he'd been raised today and somebody had seen him prancing around with his sister in a tutu. You're doing dangerous stuff to children. Let them be children. Let them play. Let them have their fantasies, but rein them in when you see the fantasies start being acted out in negative ways. And it is negative to act out homosexual fantasies. It is against the normal programming of our species. It is going to lead you to extinct yourself, to become a Darwin Award winner. Now that is a choice that some will make, but most will not. And many, many very famous gay or bisexual people have had children and actually stayed married and tried to be faithful to some extent. Leonard Bernstein, the composer-conductor, was one such person who was very tortured by his homosexuality. Maybe bisexuality is a better way to describe him. I think the movie that came out recently on Netflix was reasonably good about his life, but I think overplayed the sympathy card for this artist who had a problem with his sexuality. And maybe overplayed the sympathy card for his wife who allowed it to happen for so long. Okay, enabling narcissistic behavior will only make it worse. You have to be willing to draw a line if you want to have a healthy relationship. You've got to be willing to stand up for yourself. Anybody who tells you, be nice, get along, go with the flow, me too, they're not your friends. I promise it's going to get you in trouble. You may get virtue signaling points for going along with the crowd, but at some point your virtue will be severely challenged by doing that. I know that absolutely in every dimension of my life, that anytime I avoided setting a boundary I knew needed to be there, the consequences became worse and worse until there was nothing to do but run away from the situation, divorce, quit a job, get fired. All of the extreme outcomes of being nice lead to bigger conflicts. And this applies in war. Okay? Alexander was so successful because he knew when to be nice and when to be an asshole, and how to set boundaries. That's what a successful leader does. They're not a micromanaging autocratic tyrant. He kind of became that later in his life. after having so much success. And that is the temptation that we have when we gain some power. It feeds our narcissism, and we start abusing that power. And let me tell you, abuse of power is karmic sin. There are times when you have to use power. As a parent, you have to exercise your power to be a parent. And you have to be a tough parent sometimes. You have to know when to draw the line, though. Just as there's a case this week about the parent whose child died because he was forcing him to run on this treadmill thing or something, and he ended up dying for some reason or other. I don't know the details of that. I rather suspect that the kid had been vaccinated and died of a coronary, and they blame it on the parent who made him do laps on the thing because he was a little bit chubby. This is an example of how stories are spun as propaganda these days, as woke cult propaganda. This is evil shit. They're trying to blame anyone but who's actually guilty. In every situation, every bit of news you see is propagandized to some extent by whoever's putting it up. And independent news is too. All of these places that I go here for my news now because it's independent and it's non-profit. Look at who the board of directors are and the main players in those organizations. I will mention one that I found today because I found some people pointing to this one and saying this is a good source of real information. Let's see if I can find it. ProPublica was cited as they were talking about one of their articles that was saying how shitty the new ships of the U.S. Navy were, and what a waste, blah 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 blah, and basically spinning this idea that our military is worthless and we better roll over and let the commies take over. Okay, well, let's look at who the leadership of this bunch is. Let's see. Paul Sagan is the chair of the board of this non-profit news organization. Executive Residence Catalyst Partners, venture capital firm. Previous managing director. Elected chair of our board effective January 1st, 2017, succeeding late Herbert Sandler, our founding chair. Sagan is also a director of one public company, Moderna Inc. Does that ring a bell? Let's see. Does Moderna make vaccines? And he serves on the boards of several private businesses. In addition, he is a director of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center of Boston. And he is a life trustee of the Northwestern University, where he graduated with a degree in journalism. Earlier in his career, Sagan worked at Akamai Technologies, Inc., MIT spin-out company he joined as employee number 15 and chief operating officer in 1998, and then became its president in 1999 and CEO and board member in 2005. He served as chief executive through 2012 and as a director, including an executive vice chairman, until 2019. I don't know what Akamai Technologies does. I'm not going to investigate it today, but I suggest that somebody might want to. Sagan began his career in broadcast television news. He joined WCBS-TV in 1981. What's this guy doing? What was Akamai Technologies? Oh, I don't know. This is weird. He was named news director in 1987. When he left CBS in 1991, Sagan joined Time Warner and held several executive positions until 1997, including Senior Vice President of Cable Programming and Design, and launched NY1 News, the cable news network based in New York City, and President and Editor of New Media at Time Inc., a division of Time Warner. He was a senior member of the team responsible for the development of many of the company's early online businesses. At Time Warner, Sagan was a founder of Roadrunner, the world's first broadband cable modem service, and Pathfinder, one of the early web properties that pioneered internet advertising. President Barack Obama appointed Sagan to the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee in 2010, and he served until January 2017. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker appointed Sagan to the chair of the Commonwealth's Board of Elementary and Secondary Education from 2015 until 2019. Sagan is a 3-time Emmy Award winner for broadcast journalism in New York, a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences since 2008, and the 2009 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in the technology category. Sagan was also a member of the Knight Commission on the information needs of communities in a democracy. I could go on and on here, but I think you get the idea. If this episode doesn't get blocked or banned quickly, I'm afraid it might if they're processing the last 5 or 10 minutes. Like, share, subscribe, and come back again for the next edition of the Amish Tower. Happy karma.